I'm Liv, and welcome to the Leopard Lodge. If you are new here, this is a channel dedicated to creative projects in the home. A couple of weeks ago, I posted a video about cleaning out my closet where I divided my clothes into 3 piles: sell, donate, and alter. Since then, I've done one video where I addressed my skinny jeans, and that was meant to be part of this video, but it got too big for its britches. No pun intended. I intended the pun. I'm very sorry. So today we are addressing a couple of other items that I pulled from that closet clean out. We won't be getting to everything because we would be here literally all day, but if you enjoy seeing this kind of video and you want to see more, let me know in the comments below. This video is going to be a little bit more geared toward some simpler fixes. I just want to mention that I'm not a super advanced sewer, but I have taken a number of classes over the course of my life. In a lot of ways, I am still learning or relearning because all of those classes happened like 15 years ago or something. So, you know, sometimes we don't remember everything so sharply when we age. I loved the color of this sweater, which I think I have decided to call burnt sienna. It's a little bit more orange than like a mustard yellow. Here we have a very basic long brown sweater, kind of a rusty orangey mustard brown. There's nothing too special about it, but I do like the color, and I do like these pockets quite a bit. It's nice to lounge around in, but I don't like how long it is. It's just too long. It has this weird kind of swoopy thing happening, and I would really just prefer it to be shorter. It's going to be a very straightforward fix. The one tricky part is that I am dealing with this curve, and I'm going to want my end stitch to be probably right below the pocket. I first calculated the length that I wanted the sweater to be when I finished, which was 1 inch below the bottom of the pocket. I'm going to mark that with a little bit of chalk here. Now this line is not where we want to cut. This is where we want the sweater to wind up. So we're actually going to cut much further down and then fold 2 times under. I added 2 inches below my original line, so 3 total from the pocket down. That way it's just a really easy number to work with, and we have plenty of room for air. This would be our cut line. I repeated this on the other pocket and then connected the lines. I did this somewhat haphazardly. Using a yardstick may have been a little more precise. With the lines drawn and connected, I cut off the excess piece. From here, I folded the bottom up onto itself, measured 1 inch, and pinned in place. I repeated this all the way across. If this was a different material, cotton, linen, something more natural, I would actually go ahead and just iron this down. But I know that because this is synthetic, it's not going to really stay. So that's why I'm pinning it. From here, I'm going to do something called basting. Basting is a long stitch that sort of acts to hold something in place temporarily. Not to be confused with basting a chicken. The basting is really just to hold the stitch in place, and then we're going to fold it over and do our real stitch. You can do this by hand or with machine. It's up to you. So you want to go through the side that no one can see, make a very small little stitch, go back through, and then you can do a much wider stitch. So if I were to skip this step and just try to fold it over on itself again, it might get a little wonky. You can do this very easily on your home machine by adjusting the stitch to being very long. Every sewing machine is going to be different, but for the sake of explanation, this adjusts my length, or the length between each time it went under and out. So you would see like a length of stitching, a length of stitching, a length. That's the length. And then there's width. You can also change the width of your stitch, which is more important if you're doing like a zigzag stitch, which would just be this width. I hope that makes sense. Okay, getting ready to do our basting stitch on the machine. I am turning my length up to the max. I want a straight stitch. It's basically just like a fast and loose stitch to hold everything in place for a little while. I ran into something that's very common with stretchy fabric when you try to do a straight stitch. Have this bunching, and that comes from pulling the fabric and just stretching it out to kind of demonstrate why you don't want it to happen. But it's not a big deal in this case. We want to cover that up in the end. So this is totally fine, but that's why we'll be using a zigzag stitch later, because this is a stretchy fabric. And with the zigzag stitch, that won't happen. Now on that first round, I used a contrasting thread just so it would be easier to see, but I am going to switch to a different one. This thread will still be visible on the inside of my sweater. Consider that you might want to use a matching thread. Otherwise, I'm just going to roll this over, pin it down again. Since I was working with a stretchy fabric, I moved my machine to a zigzag stitch and completed the hem. All in all, a pretty simple fix. But I now have an item of clothing that I actually want to wear, and this doesn't go back to the thrift store where I got it in the first place. This real velvet, I made it out of something else. It used to be a shawl, like a velvet shawl. I just didn't really wear it. It didn't really work for me. So I turned it into this. Nice little backless moment. This would tie. It was, for more formal special occasions. The tie caused this to kind of rise up too much, and it's just a bit more cropped than I would like it to be. Since the alterations to close up the back of this piece are very specific to this garment, I'm not going to go too far into detail about it. The plan was to cut off the tie backs and then layer the back to create a V, simply sewing everything down flat. My main issue with this top was that it was just a little bit too cropped, so I wanted to add fringe to the bottom to add length. Inspired by a variety of past generations, I thought this might be a good time to bring some fringe back into my life. Besides my ears, of course. At the Leopard Lodge Jewelry. Go get yourself a pair. So, I was originally going to do black fringe, but then I thought that the contrast of this kind of ivory cream color here could be pretty cool. So I'm gonna go ahead and attach this. I started by pinning the fringe down on the hem all the way around. to sewing this down, past me for some reason decided that I was going to use a zigzag stitch, but I started running into some issues. I stopped because, as I suspected, a piece of fringe has been caught in there. I gotta fix this. I'm actually going to go in and seam rip this all open so I can pull this back up. And we're gonna come at this from a different approach. I actually wound up seam ripping everything I had already sewn. It was very painful and slow. I had to be very careful. A much easier method I found was to add the trim onto the hemline as it went into the machine. Working in small sections, I would line it up and then pull taut on each end while feeding it through. And of course, I switched back to a straight stitch. It was the correct thing to do. And that concluded the project. This piece is very reminiscent of 2002, 1972, 1922, brought all together in 2022. It's literally too cold in my house to take my turtleneck off, so staying on for this, but this is the green shirt that I am working on. I love the olive color of this top and its kind of 1950s vibe. The problem with thrift stores closing their dressing rooms these days still is that I still can't try anything on. And I have to make an educated guess about whether or not something will fit me, and sometimes things do not. It is too big, and it is not flattering. It did look a little bit large on the hanger, but I didn't know it was gonna fall so unflatteringly. So, to the chopping block we go. This is kind of like a stretchy sweater material, which is a little bit tricky to sew with, so it'll be an interesting challenge for me. With the garment turned inside out, I started off by cutting off the sleeves to lean into more of a capped effect. I think I'm gonna get these sleeves off at 1 inch. Now, because this is sweater material, I'm gonna do what is called a rolled hem. And then using sewing chalk, I marked where on the seams I wanted to take it in. About 7 inches down, I want it to be at 2.5. I'm gonna do a bit of a taper. With my sewing machine set to the zigzag setting for stretchy material, I simply followed the chalk line. I'm a little bit scared. It's super stretchy. I haven't sewn a lot of sweater material, but it's the first time for everything. I don't know if you can see this line, but that is my chalk mark, and I'm just sewing right on it. Obviously, this is not looking great yet, but it has come in, and there's obviously quite a bit of fabric still that we will need to address, and that's why it looks so kind of bunchy and bulky. And in trying that on, I did actually feel like I could completely cut the sleeve off, and that is just gonna make for a less bulky cap sleeve. I also cut off a lot of the excess fabric from the new side seams that I had just created. Back at the sewing machine, I did a zigzag stitch on the raw edge of the sleeve to keep the fabric from fraying. You basically want the needle to be going half on and half off of the fabric. The thread that is pulled onto the part that is off of the sleeve winds up kind of encapsulating the edge into it. I did this technique on the raw edges of the side seams as well. I wound up putting a straight stitch in next to my original zigzag stitch on my side seam. Basically, I was just kind of trying to smooth out the bulkiness of the sides, and it sort of worked. It's starting to look more like a shirt. So we have a zigzag stitch on the raw edge, we have our original zigzag stitch,
and the straight stitch I put in next to that, which is making it look a lot cleaner.
The table, I did sort of a rolled hem, basically folding the edge over onto itself and then pinning down. But at the machine, I realized that pinning down maybe wasn't that necessary, and slash maybe would have been better if I hadn't done that. So I took everything out. I wanted to pull the fabric taut, which I thought might help with the bulkiness of the seam. And removing the pins helped me to do this. Whether or not any of this actually worked is still to be determined. I did this same kind of like mock rolled hem thing on the sleeves, folding the edges down, doing the zigzag stitch, yada yada yada. However, doing this kind of gave me this like flutter effect on the sleeves that was really not the vibe. So I folded the hem in again and did something that is also called basting, but not exactly the same. Basting in this situation is used to hide the thread on the outside of the garment. Basically, you're doing just the tiniest little stitch on the outside, on the visible side of the fabric, and you're doing a longer stitch on the back. And this is used actually most often in hems. I've seen it done with really like slippery material like silk before, where you can really see just like every little pinpoint on silk. So you just want to have like just a little bit showing, just to like go through and grab it and then come back. This is basically just to tack the sleeves down without being able to see the stitching on the other side. Spoiler alert, this didn't really work out that well. This sure gave me a lot of drama. So I actually took the stitching out and started over. So instead of sending the needle all the way through, I actually just would grab the edge of the sleeve and then just poke the needle through like a couple little fibers on the inside, so it doesn't actually go all the way through to the front. I also did this in a kind of like looped scallop pattern instead of the straight lines. I hope you can see what I was doing in the video, and that will help you to understand. And that finished off the very difficult shirt that does have some kind of warping on the sides, as you can see. But tucked in, it's actually fine, and the sleeves look as good as they're going to. And that is all. Let me know in the comments which item was your favorite. Do you think fringe is back? Should we bring fringe back? I think yes. I think it's probably already back, obviously. By the way, you can shop my earrings on my website. There's probably gonna be new colors coming soon. Like I said, let me know if you want to see more videos like this. Having fun doing the sewing thing. I wanted to be a fashion designer when I was a kid. Obviously, I still like it. So that's my story. I will see you in the next video. And that is all. Okay, bye.